I worked for Beyoncé's medical team, and I'll tell you right now, her blood samples never expired. It sounds insane, but it's the truth. What started as a prestigious job quickly turned into something I couldn't ignore. Behind closed doors, we weren't just preserving health. We were tampering with life itself. You won't believe the dark secret I was part of, but I'm about to reveal it. When I first landed the job, it felt like everything I had worked for had come to fruition. I was fresh out of medical school and eager to make my mark. Working with Beyoncé's medical team? It was the kind of opportunity you only dream of. The pay was insane. The access to high-end medical technology was top-notch. And, let's be real, just being in the same room as someone of her stature was a thrill. For most, it would be a dream come true. And at first, I thought it was for me, too. The role seemed simple enough at first. Regular checkups, blood tests, making sure her health was always at peak performance. I had worked with other celebrities before, so nothing felt out of the ordinary. But it was the attention to detail that caught me off guard. The level of care, the extra precautions. It was almost obsessive. I understood, of course. Celebrities are brands, and their health is their most valuable asset. But there was something strange about the way they managed Beyoncé's medical routine. The intensity of it all felt different. The first time I came across her blood samples, I thought it was just a routine test. I had done thousands of them before, but as I stood there, holding the vial in my hand, something didn't feel right. The sample had been stored for weeks, months maybe. Yet it looked as fresh as the moment it was drawn. The liquid inside didn't show a single sign of deterioration. No coagulation, no separation of plasma, nothing. Just pure, perfectly preserved blood. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe it was some kind of advanced preservation technology. After all, I wasn't exactly privy to all of the high-tech methods they used behind the scenes. But as the days went on, I noticed more and more things that seemed unusual. The team acted strangely when I asked about the samples, almost as if I shouldn't be asking. They'd give vague answers or simply say it was classified information, as if what we were doing was too advanced for anyone to question. I wasn't one to stir the pot, especially not in such a high-stakes environment, but I couldn't ignore what I was seeing. I remember the first time I realized this wasn't a simple medical procedure. It was a Wednesday afternoon when it hit me. I had been tasked with organizing her medical files for the past week. Nothing exciting, just going through the usual routine tests and checkups. And I came across her latest blood work. I had to double-check her last sample date. It was months ago, and yet the sample from today had been drawn just a few days ago. But the real kicker? The older sample, still sitting in its vial, looked completely untouched. Same color, same texture. No sign of aging. I couldn't believe it. It was like no time had passed at all. This wasn't just some minor glitch in the system. This was something far beyond what I was used to seeing. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe it was just a fluke. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I began to pay closer attention, and that's when I started noticing the patterns. Every time I looked at her blood samples, the same thing happened. They never seemed to expire. And it wasn't just the blood. Every medical test, every scan, every result seemed too perfect, too controlled. No sign of decay, no sign of time doing its job. It was like Beyoncé was trapped in a suspended moment, untouched by the natural aging process. The team's secrecy started to make sense now. They were guarding something powerful. but I had no idea just how deep this went. I remember feeling unsettled, but I couldn't pinpoint why. It wasn't just the blood. It was everything surrounding it. Then, one day, I had to perform a routine blood draw on her. It was just part of the job, nothing special. As I drew the blood and watched it collect into the vial, I couldn't help but glance at the label. It was the same as always, but the date was what caught my eye. The vial I had just filled with fresh blood was supposed to be stored for a series of tests. Yet the previous sample had already been in storage for an uncomfortably long time. Longer than any medical professional would suggest for a sample of this nature. I didn't have the authority to question it, and honestly, I didn't know if I even had the right to. But as I sat there, organizing the paperwork later that day, the oddity of it all kept gnawing at me. I found myself staring at the vial in my hand, the vial that would be placed right next to the others that never seemed to age. Something wasn't right. I had to know more. I had to understand what was going on. But I didn't know where to start. I wasn't sure who I could trust. Everyone else seemed so calm, so collected, like this was just another day at the office. The more I thought about it, the more paranoid I became. Were they hiding something from me? Something about the blood? Or was I just overreacting to a set of medical procedures that I didn't fully understand yet? There were so many questions, but no answers. That night, as I went through my usual tasks, my curiosity got the better of me. I found myself standing in front of the refrigerated storage unit, staring at the rows of blood samples lined up in perfect order. My heart was racing. I reached out, pulled one of the older samples from the back, and held it in my hand. Nothing. No signs of aging. No signs of time passing. It was like this blood could survive forever. I stood there for what felt like hours, wondering if I was missing something. I was part of something that felt too big, too powerful, too unsettling. But I was still too scared to ask the right questions. Too scared to confront anyone about what I had found. What I didn't realize at the time was that this wasn't just about health. The truth was much darker, and soon I'd be in deeper than I ever thought possible. But I couldn't walk away yet. The answers I was seeking were buried deeper than I could have imagined. And I was about to discover something far worse than just blood that never expired. I thought I had seen it all in my first few weeks. I'd worked with high-profile clients before, so I knew the drill. But working with Beyoncé's team felt different. Like I was stepping into a world where nothing was quite as it seemed. The work was intense, but it wasn't just the medical side that unsettled me. It was everything around it. The secrecy, the heightened security, the way everyone seemed so guarded. It was like we weren't just looking after someone's health. We were protecting something far bigger. At first, I chalked it up to the pressures of celebrity life. With a star like Beyoncé, everything is under a microscope. Every move she makes, every breath she takes, is scrutinized by the world. So, I thought, of course, there would be extra precautions. But as the weeks went on, I began to notice something more unsettling. The team wasn't just cautious about her health. They were hiding things, and they were hiding them from me. It started with the blood samples. I had already noticed that they never seemed to expire, but it wasn't just the blood that felt off. It was everything surrounding it. Her medical files were locked down, more than any patient I had ever worked with. Only a handful of people had access to her records, and I wasn't one of them. If I needed information, I had to go through the right channels, which felt like a maze. The more I worked with the team, the more it became clear. This wasn't normal. One day, I was asked to process some test results. It wasn't unusual, but when I opened the file, I saw a few tests listed that I had never seen before. They weren't part of standard screenings or health checks. These were things I had never even heard of. Tests that had codes for names instead of actual details. The more I looked at the results, the more I felt like I was missing something. But I couldn't ask too many questions. I wasn't in the position to, and part of me didn't want to get too involved. I was just there to do my job. But then came the whispers. It wasn't anything overt, at least not at first. Just subtle things, people talking in hushed tones, exchanging quick glances whenever someone new entered the room. There were meetings that went on late into the night, meetings that I was never invited to. I tried not to make too much of it, but my unease only grew. Why were they so secretive? What were they hiding? It was like they were protecting a secret that was far too big to let anyone else in on. I began to pay closer attention, listening to the undercurrents of conversations. It wasn't always easy to hear, but there were hints of something darker. A few times, I overheard something that stopped me dead in my tracks. One of the team members was talking about preserving perfection and how time would never take it. Those words stuck with me, echoing in my mind. What were they really trying to do? At first, I thought maybe it was just some corporate jargon or just another attempt to keep the image of Beyoncé's perfection intact. But there was something in the way they spoke. It wasn't just about her image, it was something deeper. I could feel it in the air. Something unnatural was going on. Something that shouldn't have been happening in a medical facility. I tried to dismiss the feeling. I tried to tell myself I was just overthinking things. But then I saw it. One afternoon, I was walking past one of the locked rooms where the blood samples were stored. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near it, but something told me I needed to see what was inside. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, knowing that I shouldn't be there, but feeling compelled to look. Inside, the room was cold and sterile, as you would expect from a medical storage area. But what stood out were the rows of vials. They were neatly lined up, but as I looked closer, I saw that some of them weren't labeled with the usual patient names or dates. These were marked with codes I didn't recognize. And then I saw it. One of the vials was a blood sample from months ago, possibly even a year old. It should have been tossed by now, rendered useless by time. But there it was, sitting as fresh and vibrant as it had been the day it was drawn. I should have walked away, but something held me there. It wasn't just the blood. It was the feeling that I was looking at something that was far from normal. These samples were meant to be used, tested, processed, but they never seemed to decay. They didn't age. They didn't break down like normal biological samples. I'd worked with blood before. Everyone in the medical field has. But this was something else. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that maybe I was just imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had uncovered something huge, something that didn't belong in a hospital or a medical lab. This was a different kind of science, something twisted, something dark. I tried to act normal. I went back to my tasks, pretending I hadn't seen what I had seen, but the unease followed me. It was like a shadow that wouldn't leave. Everywhere I went, I couldn't escape the thought of those blood samples, of the secrecy surrounding them, of what it all meant. The more I worked with the team, the more I noticed things didn't add up. I started feeling like I was in the middle of something much bigger than I had bargained for. A high-stakes game of life and death. And I wasn't sure where I stood in it anymore. But I couldn't just walk away. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that this wasn't about keeping her healthy. This was about something darker, something that went beyond medicine. I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't fully understand. What I was about to discover next would shatter everything I thought I knew about science, life, and the true cost of perfection. By the time I began to piece things together, it felt like I was stumbling blindly into a world I didn't fully understand. The medical team, the procedures, the secrecy. It was all adding up to something far more disturbing than I could have ever imagined. But there was still so much I didn't know. And it was that lack of knowledge that made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unable to see what lay below. I remember the night I crossed the line. It was late. Most of the team had gone home, leaving just a skeleton crew. I was finishing up some routine paperwork when I was asked to take care of a set of blood tests. Nothing out of the ordinary. At least, that's what I thought. But when I pulled the files, there were a few things that immediately struck me as odd. The tests weren't listed under normal categories. They weren't part of the standard physicals or checkups we'd been doing for weeks. These were labeled differently, labeled in codes I had never seen before. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should even be handling this. It wasn't just the unusual labels. It was the fact that these tests seemed too invasive. Not the kind of test that you would typically give to a high-profile celebrity. But I pushed my doubts aside. I had no reason to believe anything was wrong. I was a medical professional. I was supposed to do my job. So I continued. As I prepped the samples, I couldn't help but notice the faintest flicker of hesitation on the faces of the senior members of the team. There was something off about the way they spoke about the tests. They were too vague, too guarded. When I asked why these specific tests were being run, I was met with a vague reply. Just a precaution. Something we need to monitor closely. They made it sound like nothing more than a simple checkup, but I could tell by their tone that this wasn't just routine. I'd seen plenty of tests in my career, and I knew what to expect from each one. But these were different. These tests weren't just checking for standard health issues. They were looking at something deeper, something almost unnatural. It wasn't just about making sure her blood chemistry was normal. It was about manipulating it, changing it. The tests were running longer than they should have, almost like they were trying to alter something or make it behave differently. After a while, I couldn't ignore the suspicion gnawing at me. I had to see the results myself. It wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a compulsion. The results came back the next day, and I rushed to check them. What I saw made my stomach drop. The blood tests weren't showing just the usual data. Red and white blood cell counts, hormone levels, glucose, and cholesterol readings. There were readings that shouldn't have been possible. The results came back indicating that her blood was thriving. Her cells were regenerating at an extraordinary rate. They weren't just healthy. They were rapidly multiplying, far faster than what should have been physically possible. Her blood was behaving like it was in some kind of accelerated healing state, but it wasn't healing from anything. It was as though her body was in a constant state of renewal. I double-checked the numbers. They couldn't be right. There had to be a mistake, but the results didn't lie. This wasn't just exceptional health. This was something far beyond normal biology. The blood was almost immortal. Her cells weren't aging, weren't deteriorating. They were actively renewing themselves at a rate that no human body should be capable of. But that wasn't the worst part. I kept digging. The data didn't stop there. I found more anomalies, results I couldn't ignore. There were references to additional tests, experiments that seemed completely unrelated to her regular health checks. They weren't just monitoring her health. They were experimenting with it. The numbers on the page were pointing to something more than just a medical breakthrough. They were pointing to a manipulation of life itself. Her blood, her cells, they weren't just being preserved. They were being controlled. I felt like I was about to uncover something monumental, something dangerous. But the more I dug into these files, the more I realized I was stepping into something I wasn't ready for. The further I went, the more I realized how much I didn't know. How much the people around me knew and weren't telling me. That's when I came across the final test result, the one I would never forget. It was a separate reading from the regular blood tests, labeled with a code that sent a shiver down my spine. Shelf life, undefined. At first, I didn't understand what it meant. I thought it was a clerical error or some sort of internal joke. But when I looked closer, I saw that the undefined result wasn't an error at all. It was a deliberate conclusion. No matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had uncovered something that shouldn't have been possible. The blood sample had been stored for months. Months. But it was as if it had never aged. It was preserved at a molecular level, untouched by time, untouched by decay. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just looking at a medical breakthrough. I was looking at something that defied nature, something that shouldn't exist. I couldn't stop myself from wondering, what was really going on here? Were they trying to make her immortal? Was this blood something they could use to achieve something far beyond any normal medical goal? Were they playing with forces that no human being should have access to? I couldn't sit with that uncertainty. I had to know more. But that was when I started to see the bigger picture. The whispers around the lab became louder. The tension between the team members became palpable. Everyone was acting like I had stumbled upon something they weren't prepared to explain. There was a clear, undeniable divide. The people in the know and the rest of us kept in the dark. And they weren't about to let anyone else in. I knew I couldn't leave it alone. But the more I uncovered, the more I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure of what would happen if I jumped. I couldn't turn back now. What I had discovered was only the beginning. I was about to find out what lengths they were willing to go to, and the price that had to be paid for immortality. By now, I had seen enough to know that something was wrong. I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went, but I was already in too deep to walk away. Every day, I found myself looking over my shoulder, feeling like there was something lurking just beneath the surface of what we were doing. Something dark. Something no one was willing to talk about. It wasn't just the blood anymore. It was everything around it. The late-night meetings, The closed-door conversations, the strange cryptic phrases that people would say when they thought no one else was listening. It wasn't just medical science anymore. It felt like something else entirely. Something I couldn't put into words. One night, I stayed late in the lab, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was really going on. Most of the team had gone home, and the building was quiet, save for the hum of machines. But something about the silence made the tension in the air feel even thicker. I kept hearing murmurs from the other side of the facility, soft voices, low and purposeful. I knew I wasn't supposed to be there, but curiosity got the better of me. I made my way down the hallway to one of the locked rooms, the ones where they stored the blood samples. But as I passed by another room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. There was no security, no one watching the hall. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Just a crack. Inside, the team was gathered around a table, their faces obscured by shadows. I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but I could make out some key words. Preservation, life essence, power. My heart raced. It sounded like they weren't just working with blood. They were working with something far beyond normal medical practice. One of the senior staff members was holding something in his hand, an object wrapped in a cloth. He lifted it slowly, reverently, as if it were sacred. He spoke in a low tone, something about a new stage in their work. That was when I saw it. There, beneath the cloth, was a vial. An old vial, one I hadn't seen before. The contents were dark, thick and swirling with a strange, unnatural light. The way they handled it, the way they spoke about it, wasn't like any experiment I had ever witnessed. This wasn't just science. This was something else. Something that felt like ritual. A strange, almost supernatural reverence surrounded them, as if they were trying to summon something. As they passed the vial around, I overheard them mention the next phase. It was clear they weren't just preserving Beyoncé's blood. They were attempting to control it, to use it for something beyond ordinary science. My stomach churned. I couldn't make sense of it. They weren't just manipulating biology. They were manipulating the very essence of life itself. That's when I realized something terrifying. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't just for health. It was for power. And it wasn't just about extending life. It was about controlling it. This was no longer about medicine. This was something far darker. Something I wasn't prepared for. I was on the verge of uncovering something that would shatter everything I thought I understood about life and death. But I knew that if I pushed any further, there would be no going back. What I discovered next was beyond anything I could have imagined. The line between science and madness was about to blur, and I was about to find myself trapped in the middle of it. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had overheard. The whispers, the cryptic phrases, the mysterious vial. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something monumental, something dangerous, and I knew I had to dig deeper. But each time I tried to get closer to the truth, it felt like I was being pushed further away, like there were invisible walls closing in around me. The team had become more secretive, more guarded. The tension in the air was palpable. Then, one night, it happened. I was asked to stay late again to help with some routine work. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary, but as the night wore on, I found myself walking down a familiar hallway. It was quiet, almost too quiet. Most of the team had gone home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My curiosity once again got the better of me. I passed by the storage room where we kept the blood samples, but this time the door was ajar. It was a small thing, just a crack, but it was enough to make my pulse quicken. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the security lights in the hallway. I shouldn't have gone in. I knew that. But something inside me screamed that I needed to see what was going on behind closed doors. I stepped inside, trying to make as little noise as possible. The air was cold, sterile, the familiar hum of the refrigeration units filling the silence. But it wasn't the refrigerators that caught my attention. It was the people. The team was there, gathered in a circle, speaking in hushed tones. They hadn't seen me yet. They were focused on something in the center of the room. As I quietly approached, I saw it. The same dark vial I had glimpsed before. Only now, it was open. They were handling it with an almost religious reverence. The liquid inside was swirling, moving like something alive. There was a glow emanating from it, almost like it was alive, like it was reacting to their presence. I couldn't believe my eyes. This wasn't just blood. It was something else. It was as if this vial contained the very essence of life itself. The team was speaking in quiet, measured voices. Words that I couldn't quite make out, but that sounded like they were invoking something. Something ancient, something primal. This wasn't just science. It was ritual. I froze, unsure of what to do. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was so close to the truth, but I felt like the more I uncovered, the more I was getting in over my head. The sense of dread grew heavier in the pit of my stomach. There was no going back from this. One of the senior doctors spoke in a low voice, his words almost drowned out by the buzzing of the machines. "This is it," he said, "the final stage. It's time for what?" My heart raced, my breath coming faster as the words hung in the air. The others nodded, their faces serious, almost reverent. They were about to do something, but what? They were treating this like a ceremony, not an experiment, a ritual. It was no longer about medical procedures. It was about control, about pushing the boundaries of life and death. I took a step closer, my mind reeling. The vial in the doctor's hand glowed even brighter as he raised it higher, as if offering it to some unseen force. I had to get out. I had to leave before I saw more. But my legs were frozen. I couldn't look away. I didn't want to see anymore. But at the same time, I couldn't tear myself away. That's when they turned. Someone in the group caught sight of me standing in the doorway. There was a moment of silence, the air thick with tension. Their eyes locked onto mine, and I knew immediately that I had crossed a line. They knew I had seen too much. "Get out," one of them whispered, his voice cold and sharp. But the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. They weren't just worried about me being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were terrified. Terrified of what I had seen. Terrified of what they had been doing. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and left the room, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing. I had been part of something that I couldn't fully understand, but what I had seen was enough to haunt me for the rest of my life. The blood, the glowing vial, the ritual, it wasn't just an experiment anymore. They were manipulating life itself, playing with forces they didn't fully comprehend. I didn't know what to do with the knowledge I had gained. I wanted to walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen what I had seen. But it was too late. There was no turning back now. I had uncovered something far darker than I could have imagined. Something beyond science, beyond reason. I was now part of something that had the power to reshape life itself. What I had witnessed was just the beginning. The more I learned, the more I realized I was trapped in a web of dark science. And soon I would have to decide just how much I was willing to lose to escape it. The weeks after that night were the hardest of my life. I couldn't escape the images in my head, the glowing vial, the reverence with which the team handled it, the whispers that promised something far beyond normal science. It felt like I was stuck in a nightmare, unable to wake up. Each day, the weight of what I knew pressed harder on my chest, like a constant reminder that I had stepped into something I wasn't meant to understand. I kept telling myself that I should leave, that I should walk away and never look back. But the truth was, I couldn't. I had been drawn into something so deep, so twisted, that leaving felt like a betrayal of my own conscience. The people involved, the secrecy, the dark power they were trying to control. It was all too much to process. Yet, at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that the more I stayed, the more I was becoming part of something I couldn't undo. The pressure from the team grew unbearable. They started watching me more closely, making sure I wasn't asking the wrong questions. Whenever I walked into a room, the conversations would stop, and eyes would follow me like I was a threat. It was like I had become a liability, someone who knew too much. And the thing that haunted me the most, I knew they were right. I was in too deep. I started to lose myself. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Was I the professional who took an oath to heal? Or was I just another pawn in a game that was far beyond my control? Every time I looked at Beyoncé, I saw her not as the icon she was, but as the object of a dark experiment. Her health was no longer the goal. Immortality was. They weren't just trying to keep her at the top. They were trying to keep her untouchable. They were trying to make her something that couldn't be killed. And I was helping them do it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was complicit. Even if I wasn't actively participating in the experiments, I was still enabling them. Every time I administered a test, every time I handled a vial, every time I turned a blind eye, I was becoming part of something that was far beyond the realm of medical ethics. One night, when the rest of the team had gone home, I found myself staring at a blood sample. The same vial I had seen before, the one that had never aged. I ran my fingers over the cold glass, wondering if there was anything human left in what we were doing. I felt sick. I was no longer just a medical professional. I was part of something monstrous. And deep down, I knew that if I stayed, I would be no better than the people I had been watching all this time. I was slowly losing myself in this twisted reality. I had to leave, but it wasn't that simple. The team wasn't going to let me walk away that easily. The next morning, I found a note on my desk. It wasn't signed, but I knew who it was from. It was a warning. They knew I had seen too much. They knew I was starting to ask questions, to dig deeper into things I wasn't supposed to understand. The note told me in no uncertain terms, "Leave now, or we'll make sure you never leave." My heart raced as I read those words. I wasn't just dealing with medical professionals anymore. I was dealing with people who would go to any lengths to protect their secret. And I had no idea how far they were willing to go. I knew the risks. I knew that walking away would come with consequences, but I couldn't stay. I couldn't be a part of this anymore. The fear of what would happen if I stayed was stronger than the fear of what would happen if I left. I packed my things that night, my hands shaking as I gathered my belongings. It felt like I was abandoning something I had worked so hard for, but at the same time, it felt like I was saving myself. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't trust anyone enough to let them know what I was planning. The team was too dangerous. The less they knew, the better. As I walked out of the building, I glanced back one last time. The lights inside were dim, the hallways empty, but I could still feel the weight of their eyes on me. The team was watching. I knew they wouldn't let me go easily, but I couldn't stay another minute in that place. As I stepped out into the night air, I thought I was free. But the truth was, I was never really going to escape. What I had learned, what I had seen, would follow me for the rest of my life. I had seen things that no one was ever meant to see. I had been a part of something so dark, so unnatural, that there was no way to erase it from my mind. I would always carry the weight of what I had done and what I had witnessed. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if I would be hunted down or if I would ever be able to fully escape the nightmare I had stumbled into. But one thing was certain. I was never going to be the same. I had walked away, but in doing so, I had stepped into an even darker world. The consequences of my actions were just beginning, and I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. The team wasn't going to let me go so easily. The nightmare wasn't over yet. And soon, I would learn that the price for immortality was far more terrifying than I had ever imagined. The first few weeks after I left felt like a blur. I tried to put everything behind me, to forget the sterile rooms, the vials, the rituals. I tried to convince myself that it was all just some twisted dream. But the truth is, once you've been involved in something like that, it never truly leaves you. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blood, the glowing liquid, the way the team handled it with such reverence. It wasn't just medical science anymore. It was something darker, something that no human being should have ever tampered with. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger. The person I was before that job seemed like a distant memory, like someone I used to know. Now, I was a part of something that had no place in the world, and I didn't know how to get back to the life I had once known. The worst part was the silence, the constant weight of what I had learned. There was no one I could talk to, no one who would understand. I had tried once to confide in a friend, but the words wouldn't come out. How could I explain what I had seen without sounding like I was losing my mind? I had seen things that no one was meant to see, and the consequences of what I had done were still unfolding. I started getting paranoid. Every time I left my apartment, I looked over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be following me. The feeling of being watched never left. The more I tried to move on, the more I realized I was being hunted, not just by the team, but by the consequences of my own actions. The nightmares grew worse. I woke up in cold sweats. The images of that vial still burned into my memory. The whispers, the strange rituals, they followed me. I couldn't escape it. I thought that by leaving, I had severed myself from everything that had happened. But I was wrong. The truth had a way of following you, of clawing its way into your life, no matter how hard you tried to forget. I started noticing things. Small things, but things that made my blood run cold. An envelope left on my doorstep with no return address. A message on my phone with no number. All of them simply said the same thing. We know what you saw. At first, I thought it was just my paranoia playing tricks on me, but as the messages kept coming, the dread began to settle deep in my bones. I wasn't safe. I never would be. The people I had been involved with weren't going to let me walk away. The team knew what I had seen. They knew that I could expose them, and they weren't about to let that happen. They wanted me to stay quiet, to stay hidden, but they also knew I would never truly be free. The worst part wasn't the fear of them finding me. It was the realization that the price for everything I had witnessed wasn't just my own safety. It was my sanity. I couldn't live with the knowledge of what I had been a part of. The blood, the immortality, the experiments. It was all too much. It wasn't just a dark secret anymore. It was a dark weight I carried everywhere, one that felt like it was crushing me. I tried to go to the authorities, but what could I say? Who would believe me? I had no concrete evidence, no proof of what I had seen, what I had been involved in. I had nothing but the memories of a secret that no one would ever understand. And even if I did find someone to believe me, what could they do? Who could stop something so powerful, something that had been hidden for so long? The more I tried to move on, the more I realized that there was no escaping what I had seen. The blood never expired. The experiments never ended. And I had been a part of it all. I couldn't forget. No matter how hard I tried, the images kept coming back. The vial, the glow, the rituals. I couldn't run from it. And that was when it hit me. I wasn't just a witness to something dark and twisted. I had been a part of it. I had helped them manipulate life itself, helping them reach for something that no human being should ever touch. I had been complicit in their attempt to control immortality, and now there was no going back. I wasn't going to find peace. I wasn't going to find freedom. I had seen too much. I had been too close to something that had been tampering with forces far beyond human understanding. As I sat there in the darkness of my apartment, I realized the full extent of the nightmare. It wasn't just about what I had seen. It was about what I had helped create. And there was no escaping the fact that once you become part of something like that, there's no walking away. I had left the team. I had walked away from the experiments, but I could never leave what they had done to me, what they had made me a part of. The price for immortality had been more than I could ever pay. The truth is, immortality came at a cost that I would have to live with for the rest of my life. And no matter how far I ran, I would never escape the consequences of what I had witnessed. The final payoff. I thought I could walk away. I thought leaving would free me from the nightmare I had become a part of. But I was wrong. The truth about what I saw, what I helped create, it followed me no matter where I went. The blood that never expired. The experiments that defied nature. I can never forget what they were trying to do. Control life, control death. And I was complicit in it. The cost of immortality wasn't just their price, it's mine. I'm haunted by the knowledge of what I witnessed. And no matter how much time passes, I'll never be free of it. The team will never let me go. They'll always be watching, waiting. I'm trapped in a life I can't escape, carrying the weight of a secret that shouldn't exist. The true horror wasn't just in what I saw. It was in what I helped make real. And that's something I'll never undo.